Welcome to another edition of When the Spirit Takes Over. Here we analyze aspects of human consciousness which appears to exist outside the familiar constraints of time and space, a potential of spirit which appears to take over as we cross from one realm into another. Reincarnation, also called transmigration or metempsychosis, in religion and philosophy, rebirth of the aspect of an individual that persists after bodily death, whether it be consciousness, mind, the soul, or some other entity, in one or more successive existences. Britannica definition. The term reincarnation comes from the Latin, which literally means entering the flesh again. The concept of the soul, mind, or consciousness continuing after death to be reborn in cycles throughout various lifetimes is an old one. It seems the older the religion or philosophy, the greater chance in its belief. The Greek equivalent to this concept is called metempsychosis, which is derived from two words, meta, beyond, and empsykon, which means to put a soul into. While some Jewish scholars vigorously reject the whole notion of reincarnation, many Kabbalists embrace it as an underlying principle within their mystical sect. This concept within Judaism was thought to have originated around the same time as the Golden Age of Islam and the formation of the House of Wisdom during the 8th century. Rare books and scrolls were collected from all over the known world to be translated into Arabic by both Islamic and Judaic scholars searching for truth, enlightenment, and wisdom. Manuscripts from some of the greatest minds in history were brought together, offering views on a variety of important subjects, reincarnation being one of them. Although mainstream Islam does not promote the concept of reincarnation, the mystical Islamic order known as Sufism does. It is also believed by some that this is the time and source from where Judaic Kabbalism originated, not as claimed by some who believe it to be a rediscovery from lost work of 2nd century Kabbalists. Both Sufis and Judaic Kabbalists were tapping into older writings which revealed some of the greatest secrets handed down from all ages. One of the best known Jewish Kabbalists born in Jerusalem during the 16th century was Rabbi Isaac Luria, 1534 to 1572, also known as Holy Ali. He was the mastermind behind Lurianic Kabbalah, which became the foundation for perverted Judaic sects promoting sinful behavior and nihilism by both Sabbatai Zevi, the Jewish Messiah of 1666, and Jacob Frank, a self-proclaimed reincarnation of Sabbatai Zevi. This topic is covered in detail in my previous book, The Left-Hand Path. Every Jew must fulfill 613 mitzvot, commandments from God, and if he doesn't succeed in one lifetime. He comes back again and again until he finishes. Rabbi Isaac Luria. According to Jewish Kabbalists, there is the real eternal you, and there is the physical momentary expression of the ego, the self. This is essentially what we call the soul. Our conscious behavior is a reflection of various levels of subconscious forces, layers of interlocking energy expressing and experiencing itself from various perspectives. The Hebrew word for reincarnation is Gilgul, which means cycle or wheel. One of the fundamental Kabbalistic texts from Jewish mysticism is the Zohar, a book which includes commentary on mystical aspects of the Torah. The Zohar talks about two types of souls: unblemished souls which come down here to fulfill their life's mission, untarnished and without sin, and souls which go through the wear and tear of everyday life, making their fair share of mistakes while becoming blemished along the way. According to the Kabbalists, this is all part of a natural cyclical mechanism to evolve our overall consciousness. Our immediate souls are believed to be part of a process which began a very long time ago, a process in which the collective consciousness of humanity is trying to evolve through infinite experiences within all realms and levels of that consciousness. And in concurrence with Rabbi Isaac Luria, if the soul fails to fulfill its designated purpose in one incarnation, it returns again and again until it does. Each soul descends from the higher realms of spiritual consciousness to a narrow, dense perspective of unique awareness in which the experience appears detached and isolated from all other souls and perspectives. Our ego or soul awareness transcends the purity of the spirit realm in order to experience and fulfill even the most minor but unique experiences. No one's life is any more important to the overall mission than any other, and we all play our part within each incarnation, like various size cogs in a great universal clock of growing consciousness. According to the Zohar, the soul has 5 levels of separation as it transcends from pure spirit into the physical soul ego. It is believed that divine providence provides each soul with the opportunities necessary to advance through experience. However, although these opportunities are presented at a physical level, it is ultimately up to the individual whether or not to participate. Most of us have experienced the déjà vu feeling, a French term which means already seen. Together with serendipity, these types of occurrences are all part of our soul's connection to spiritual consciousness, interwoven within the fabric of time, space, and other souls as they advance along their similar yet unique paths. Christianity, on the whole, does not believe in the concept of reincarnation. Through biblical scripture, they are led to believe that we only have one life here on earth, after which eternal judgment takes place with a verdict based on whether we accept Jesus as our Saviour or not. Those who rejected Christ go to a place of eternal torment, while those who declared Jesus to be their Saviour spend eternity in paradise in the presence of God. And the dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Ecclesiastes 12:7. Just as people are destined to die once, and after that to face judgment. Hebrews 9:27. As a cloud vanishes and is gone, so one who goes down to the grave does not return. He will never come to this house again. His place will know him no more. Job 7:9-10. Many Christian scholars and theologians are of the opinion that the concept of reincarnation was slowly removed from the official writings of Christianity due to its contradiction towards the doctrine of corporeal resurrection, which ultimately undermined the need for Christ's redemptive sacrifice. It is believed that in 553 AD, during the Second Council of Constantinople, the idea of reincarnation was found to have no place in the Christian Church. Although reincarnation was not officially rejected at this council, those early church fathers who were accused of teaching the idea of reincarnation had their works banned. 553 AD did mark the end of the debate on reincarnation within the Christian community. Elizabeth Jensen, The Argument Over Reincarnation in Early Christianity. Reincarnation has not always been so unacceptable to church doctrine. In the early church, as doctrinal matters were being formulated, there was a vigorous debate about the pre-existence of souls and transmigration of souls, reincarnation. Some of the early church fathers, such as Clement of Alexandria, Justin Martyr, St. Gregory of Nyssa, Arnobius, and St. Jerome, considered reincarnationist thinking and did believe in the pre-existence of souls. Reincarnation was a common Greek belief at the time and was discussed as a Christian possibility, especially by those with some knowledge of Greek philosophy, but it was not adopted officially. Even St. Augustine of Hippo, in his Confessions, entertained the possibility of reincarnation. Christian Reincarnation by Reverend Donald McGregor. Even Julius Caesar and Alexander Cornelius Polyhistor made references to reincarnation being a core doctrine of the Druids in Britain, Gaul, and Ireland. The principal point of their doctrine is that the soul does not die, and that, after death, it passes from one body into another. The main object of all education is, in their opinion, to imbue their scholars firm belief in the indestructibility of the human soul, which, according to their belief, merely passes at death from one tenement to another. For by such doctrine alone, they say, which robs death of all its terrors, can the highest form of human courage be developed. Julius Caesar. The Pythagorean doctrine prevails among the Gauls, teaching that the souls of men are immortal, and that after a fixed number of years they will enter into another body. Alexander Cornelius Polyhistor. Muslims on the whole also reject the idea of reincarnation. They believe that after death their soul is escorted by the angel of death, Azrael, to a place where they await judgment known as Barzekah. Here God sends 2 angels to question the waiting soul. To him is your return altogether. Allah's promise is always true. Indeed, he originates the creation, then resurrects it, so that he may justly reward those who believe and do good. But those who disbelieve will have a boiling drink and a painful punishment for their disbelief. Yunus 10:4 Quran. The modern mainstream view of human life is one with no purpose, no evolution of consciousness, and no divine spark. They consider humanity to be an accident of nature, one of cells, blood and bone, which is born, lives and dies, devoid of purpose or reason, an accident with only limited time to satisfy its immediate carnal desires and selfish wants. In my experience, this view of the evolution of man is one shared by only a small minority. If pressed on the issue, most people intuitively have a sense of purpose, with some form of existential connection with a benevolent source. The atheist's view of how the world came into being is devoid of any meaning, purpose, or spiritual connection, making it a very lonely and empty place. Atheists' view on the creation of the universe. The belief that there was once nothing, and for a long time nothing happened to that nothing. However, one day, for absolutely no reason, the nothing magically exploded, creating everything. And this bunch of everything, for no reason whatsoever, magically rearranged itself into self-replicating bits, which eventually turned into dinosaurs.
Fields he believes, chained in the cells and you believe, running away believe, out in the streets they believe, painting her face she believes, going to war he believes, burning the dead believe, vows newlyweds they believe, they're slamming the doors, you still believe, crying through the night, still believe, losing your way, believe, I don't care what you say, still believe, still believe.
The Dalai Lama is a title given by the people of Tibet to their spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhism. This philosophical form of Buddhism is known as the Yellow Hat sect. The Dalai Lama is considered to be a reincarnate custodian of this lineage of Tulku teachers. The current Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, was selected as the reincarnation of the 13th Dalai Lama back in 1937, when he was only 2 years old. On the death of the 13th Dalai Lama, a search party was sent out to find his successor, the reincarnation of his soul. A handful of candidates were presented, which had to go through various processes to ensure their connection and validity to the previous leader. One test consisted of showing the boy pairs of objects, one which belonged to the last Dalai Lama and the other of no importance. In each case, Tenzin Gyatso chose the correct object. Some particulars of the signs by which the authenticity of the reincarnation was attested, as reported from Tibet, are transmitted by the Dalai correspondent of the Times in the issue of October 29. Not only had the existence of the reincarnate Dalai Lama and his whereabouts been indicated in a vision according to precedent, but also when visited by the search party disguised as traders, he recognized their holy calling and distinguished between the status of the individuals who composed the party. He took hold of a rosary which had belonged to the late Dalai Lama, telling the beads and repeating the Buddhist formula. In a future test, when the Dalai Lama's rosary, small drum and walking stick were offered him, he chose those which had been his own in his previous incarnation, in preference to the replicas presented to him at the same time, a test in which other aspirant to the office failed. Reincarnation of a Dalai Lama, published in 1939. Past life memories is a phenomena in which a person appears to have recollections of past lives. Memories of places, people and events enter their conscious thoughts in a vivid and lucid fashion. Mainstream science regard these memories as imagination, or the mind just creating what they refer to as false memories. This experience has greater prevalence in children under the age of 7, possibly due to the way their minds work, as they are still under development with both hemispheres working in unison, unlike the mature mind of those whose brain hemispheres have separated, working independently of one another. The soul ego of the young child is still developing as it transcends from higher levels of awareness towards the singularity and unique perspective of the adult's soul consciousness. Consequently, the child's mind, working as one during development, is closer to its spiritual roots than the mind of the adult. This is thought to allow easy flow of consciousness between the right hemisphere, which is concerned with emotion and imagination, and the left side, which is more analytical, rational, and logical. As a result, flashes of awareness are thought to penetrate, giving a child visions from a spiritual collective which exists beyond time and space. offering snippets of energy vibrations concerning various past lives. As the child matures, with both hemispheres working independently, his soul awareness develops to a point at which he can focus clearly on tasks relating to this realm alone, detaching his spiritual ties to consciousness as he explores his new life from a unique personal perspective. It is thought by some who believe in reincarnation that we choose the circumstances regarding our latest incarnation. We choose our parents, our place of birth, and the timing in which it occurs in order to increase the potential of fulfilling our latest objectives towards soul growth and conscious development. Furthermore, any relevant data from the spiritual realm or previous lives deemed necessary for the fulfillment of future objectives is presumed to be allowed to pass into the new soul in order to prime it for future success. Some of this data is thought to manifest as past life memories or even paranormal abilities. The case of James Leininger. James was born to Bruce and Andrea Leininger on the 10th of April 1998 in the San Francisco Bay Area on the west coast of the United States. When James was 22 months old, his father Bruce took him to the city's Flight Museum. While there, Bruce noticed that James, although very young, appeared to have an unusual fascination with aircraft from the Second World War. Perplexed by this, Bruce and James spent almost 3 hours looking at the museum's exhibits. During the months which followed, James began to suffer from traumatic nightmares in which he would often lay on his back, kicking his legs in the air while crying out to his mother, "Airplane crash, on fire, little man can't get out." At this time, James had not been subjected to any form of media influence which could have promoted these types of thoughts in his young, fragile mind. Only the visit to the museum which did not display such vivid material. These nightmares increased in occurrence to 3 or 4 times per week, along with his apparent obsession with toy planes and aircraft carriers. Alarmed by this, Bruce and Andrea set about trying to get to the bottom of their son's strange behavior. As James's speech improved, he was able to relate his visions to his parents in more detail. They discovered that the best time for this was moments before James went to sleep, a time when he appeared semi-conscious and drowsy. Throughout this period, James frequently talked about the life of a World War II fighter pilot who had been shot down and killed. One evening, as Bruce noticed his son getting drowsy, he began to ask James some delving questions. "What happened to your plane?" "It crashed on fire." "Why did your airplane crash?" "It got shot." "Who shot the plane?" "The Japanese." "What kind of plane did you fly?" "A Corsair." At this point, James's father, who was initially skeptical about reincarnation, began to take his son's stories seriously, and over the following months began deeper preliminary research into the matter. At one point, while Bruce was flicking through a book on World War II planes, James came over, pointing to one of the pictures, and said, "That is a Corsair, and they get flat tires all the time. Do you remember where your plane took off?" "Took off from a boat." "What was the name of the boat?" "Natoma." "That sounds Japanese." "No, it was American." "Do you remember what your name was?" "James." "Do you remember any friends?" "Jack Larson." After more research, Bruce discovered that there had indeed been an aircraft carrier during World War II named Natoma Bay. Not only that, there was also a pilot who served on the ship by the name of Jack Larson, who happened to still be alive and living in Arkansas. Many of James's drawings and artwork during this period would be signed by him as James III. Why do you sign your name as James III? Because I'm the third James. One afternoon, Bruce was flicking through a book about the Battle of Iwo Jima, which he had bought as a gift for his own father's birthday. While turning the pages, James came over, pointing at an aerial photo of the island, and said, "That was where my plane was shot down." After more research, Bruce eventually found out that one American pilot from the Natoma Bay was shot down during an attack on Iwo Jima, and to his astonishment, the pilot's name was James Houston Jr. James would describe being shot down by a direct hit to the engine, which sent him crashing on fire into the sea. On further investigation, it came to light that another pilot, a rear gunner by the name of Ralph Klaber, who was also still alive, flew from the Natoma Bay during that mission and distinctly remembered being next to James Houston's plane when it was hit by anti-aircraft fire. I would say he was hit head-on, right in the middle of the engine. Ralph Klaber. Skeptics to this apparent occurrence of reincarnation are still not satisfied, regarding James as an elaborate storyteller whose imagination just got lucky with various names he may have overheard in conversations. However, coincidences of this magnitude appear to many as paranormal evidence of some form of soul connection or reincarnation. Although James Houston did not die in a Corsair, he was one of a handful of pilots who flew them. Skeptics point out that James the boy could have remembered the name of the aircraft from his visit to the museum at 22 months old. However, after further investigation, it was discovered that the Air Museum did not have a Corsair on display at the time of the Leiningers' visit. It only appeared in the museum a few years later. Dr. Jim Tucker, M.D., a professor of psychology and neurobehavioral studies at the University of Virginia, suggests that the description of James's behavior as a young boy concerning his apparent memories of James Houston's life display elements of post-traumatic trauma, and that, as a child, he was reliving and expressing James Houston's final moments in his day-to-day activities. This is similar to other children who had been traumatized in this life and displayed what he called post-traumatic play. In some cases concerning past life memories, the individual may develop phobias relating to trauma experienced in a past life. For example, a person with a fear of water could have drowned in a previous incarnation, and someone with a fear of knives could have had a lethal experience in relation to knives in a prior life. Professor Ian Stevenson, head of psychiatry at the University of Virginia during the late 1950s and 60s, undertook extensive research into the field of reincarnation and past life memories, especially in children. In his book, Reincarnation and Biology, he outlines 225 cases in which people from all over the world had memories of previous lives. He also makes a link between bodily defects, birthmarks, and disabilities which people were born with in relation to memories of past lives. For example, a Burmese girl born with her lower right leg missing talked about another life where she was run over by a train, and a Turkish boy whose face was congenitally underdeveloped on the right side would talk about the life of a man who died from a gunshot wound to the face. Is it the case that while enough necessary data from a previous life is allowed to seep through into the new fetus, emotional baggage attached to memories permeating from higher realms of spiritual consciousness could manifest within the new soul in a physical manner? This could very well be a possibility, as the subconscious is very much in tune with our emotional aspects of memory. Furthermore, during the early stages of a child's development, when its brain hemispheres are still working in unison, emotion and right brain stimuli play a leading role in those formative years. Consequently, after the child's brain hemispheres have developed to a point at which they separate, around the age of 7, their soul awareness matures to a point at which it overrides and dominates any residual spiritual interference. It is well documented that children who experience emotional debris concerning past lives tend to grow out of it by the age of 7. The other explanation for this phenomena can be viewed as an underdeveloped soul, still in the process of transcending the higher realms of consciousness towards its unique point of soul awareness, initially beginning its journey from spiritual consciousness, a place outside lineal time constraints, where a sea of consciousness acts as a collective, uniting all soul experiences within a union of energy. In this case, it may be plausible to assume that a newborn child with an immature and underdeveloped soul still possess some form of connection to their spiritual origins, a realm in which all soul memories exist within a form of akashic record, and that the underdeveloped soul occasionally draws random influences from other realms. In theosophy and anthroposophy, the akashic record is a compendium of all universal events, thoughts, words, emotions, and intent ever to have occurred in the past, present, or future, in terms of all entities and life forms, not just human. Dr. Stevenson concluded that, although many people have the potential to tap into memories of previous lives, circumstances and chaos regarding modern everyday life appear to cloud the opportunity from coming forth. Only when something manifests of significant relevance in the current life to stimulate the memory does a recollection occur. Although most Indians believe in reincarnation, only 1 in 500 children experience vivid recollections of previous lives. Stevenson also suggested that the greater the emotional imprint left by a previous life, possibly due to a traumatic death, the more chance that residual energy would be picked up and recognized by a new soul. This seems to be the case, as most of the children who he had interviewed with past life memories claimed that their previous lives ended violently. He also noted that many of these experiences related to people who had lived within the same country, even the same city, and did not, on the whole, take place immediately after the previous life had expired, sometimes leaving many decades between the two. In 1983, a boy was born 13 kilometers outside the Indian city of Agra and given the name Tiu Sing by his parents. At the age of 2.5, the boy began to talk about a previous life of a man who owned a radio shop in Agra, married to a woman named Uma, who he'd had 2 children with. His stories grew more frequent, along with his desire to return to what he referred to as his previous life. He told his new parents that his name was Suresh Verma, and on his return home one evening was shot in the head and killed by 2 men. At first his mother and father dismissed his claims as pure fantasy. However, as his story became persistent and more detailed, his parents began to suspect there could be an element of truth to it. They asked their eldest son, Titu's brother, to look for the radio shop mentioned by Titu on his next visit to the big city, which he did a few days later. To his surprise, there was a radio shop with the name Suresh above it, and after making enquiries within, he discovered it was now owned by a widow called Uma, who had taken over the shop and the care of her 2 children after the shooting and murder of her husband a few years prior. After a brief, intense conversation, Uma went off to tell her mother and father-in-law, Suresh's parents. Intrigued by the claims made by the boy Titu, they all decided to drive out to Bard village the following morning. Once there, they met the Sing family, who introduced them to Titu. He sat next to his old wife and asked, "Do you recognize me?" "No," Uma said. Then he asked about the 2 children and whether she remembered a family outing to a fair in a neighboring city where he had bought her a selection of sweets. At this point, Uma was stunned into silence. After this initial meeting, together with a follow-up visit to the radio shop, Suresh's family became convinced that Titu was indeed the reincarnation of Suresh Verma. When Uma took Titu to meet Suresh's 2 children, she cleverly mixed them in a crowd of local children to see if Titu would spot them. This turned out not to be a difficult task, as Titu spotted them both immediately. Regarding Suresh's murder, Titu even knew the names of those involved. He said 2 men ran up to the car as it reached the house gates. One of the men, a businessman named Sadiq Johadin, fired a shot which struck Suresh in the right temple, killing him instantly. Coincidentally, there just happens to be a birthmark on Titu's head, which is the same size as a bullet and in the same spot on the right temple where Suresh was hit. Although many people believe in reincarnation, the vast majority are confused when it comes to trying to visualize this process. In essence, truth and nature has a poetical simplicity about it. Occam's razor is often used as a way to determine the truth from a range of options, by favoring the simplest explanation. The idea for this principle is attributed to an English Franciscan friar named William of Ockham, a scholastic philosopher and theologian who used a preference for simplicity to uphold the idea of divine miracles. In my opinion, some scholars and theologians tackling this subject overcomplicate the issue by creating unnecessary explanations for the situations and scenarios they try to explain. To keep the whole concept of reincarnation simple, a solid understanding of the difference between spirit and soul consciousness is necessary. From this position, the apparent mystery regarding this matter becomes less confusing. Essentially, each new incarnation is just a fresh point of attention. As consciousness devolves down into denser matter, focused towards an independent and unique perspective within this physical realm. The devolution of the soul from the spirit is a process, one in which some sensitive children whose souls have not fully matured experience vivid and lucid connections to the spirit. In most cases, this connection weakens as the child matures, allowing them to experience this reality from a fresh, new, independent perspective. Many scholars of reincarnation suggest that the soul is constantly evolving through endless experiences, and the more diverse those experiences, the faster and greater that soul grows. As children age, their soul awareness develops to a point at which emotional and spiritual residue concerning paranormal reflections of previous lives tends to fade. This is partly due to the separation of brain hemispheres, leading to a mature detachment with spiritual consciousness, allowing the unique and independent soul perspective to fulfill its life's objectives. However, these memories never entirely disappear. It is only because the soul awareness develops to a point at which it dominates the perception of living consciousness, becoming preoccupied with its connection to the five senses, that we, as adults, really tune into additional spiritual memories. This loss of recall is not irreversible and can be stimulated at any future time. Various techniques can be offered to an individual which would allow them to transcend their soul perspective in an attempt to open up the potential locked deep within the subconscious. From this new adjusted point of attention, some people are able to regress backwards in time, revealing vivid details of past lives within an abundance of memories and emotions going back throughout history. In the summer of 1980, Dr. Brian Weiss, the head of psychiatry at Mount Sinai Medical Center, Miami, came across a new patient suffering from panic attacks, fears, and anxiety issues. This was not uncommon for Dr. Weiss, who had treated many patients in the past with similar complaints. At that time, Weiss was a disciplined traditionalist who predominantly adhered to well-established scientific methods. Although studies in parapsychology were being conducted in major universities throughout the country, Dr. Weiss considered such work as fringe, even far-fetched border science. However, this was all about to change. Catherine, the patient in question, was a 21-year-old laboratory technician at the University of Miami School of Medicine. Prior to visiting Dr. Weiss, she was plagued by nightmares, visions of being trapped in a dark room as she fell over things, unable to get out. Another dream saw her on a collapsing bridge which gave way, sending her into the water below. These bad dreams were fueling her panic and anxiety attacks, to a point where her work colleagues began to notice. This ultimately led to her being referred to Dr. Brian Weiss for psychiatric help. For the first 18 months, Dr. Weiss used traditional methods of psychiatry in which he would, through discussion, consciously take Catherine back to her childhood in an effort to uncover any emotional scars which might be triggering her fears. This was standard psychiatry, a technique used to re-evaluate traumatic early memories which could be diffused through discussion from a new adult perspective of understanding, reason, and forgiveness. This process was fairly good at neutralizing past emotional baggage from influencing a patient's future well-being. As the months progressed, Dr. Weiss became steadily more concerned that Catherine's childhood memories were scarce and lacking in detail. All that could be established was that her abusive father drank a lot and her mother suffered from bouts of depression. As Dr. Weiss could not pinpoint any significant event in her past in relation to the root of her fears, her symptoms did not improve. Consequently, Dr. Weiss suggested that they try hypnosis in an attempt to bring forth Catherine's childhood memories in more detail. Reluctant at first, Catherine eventually agreed. On their first attempt at hypnosis, Dr. Weiss was able to relax Catherine enough to open up her subconscious to reveal more detailed memories. In this state, she could recall a number of traumatic experiences. She now remembered a distressing time at the dentist, along with being pushed off a diving board into a swimming pool, where she became disorientated, gagged, and swallowed water. Then she remembered at the age of 3, waking up in a dark room only to notice her father standing close by. She recalled that he reeked of alcohol and began to touch her, even down below. At this point, she became terrified and began to cry, only to be silenced by his big rough hands, which almost suffocated her. Back in the office, Catherine began to sob as she was now aware of part of the puzzle which had emotionally hampered her for years. Satisfied by this new information, Dr. Weiss was optimistic that her symptoms would now begin to improve. However, the following weeks would prove him wrong. For 6 years, Catherine had been involved in a relationship with a physician named Stuart, a married man with 2 children. Although she had a fear of flying, Stuart, in the spring of 1982, asked her to accompany him on a medical conference trip to Chicago. While they were there, Catherine pressured Stuart into visiting the Museum of Ancient Egyptian Artifacts, a subject which had always fascinated Catherine. While being shown around the museum, Catherine found herself correcting the guide who was describing a particular object. This was very much out of character for Catherine, who had not even lightly studied Egyptian history. Her correction, in this case, turned out to be correct. On Catherine's next scheduled psychiatric visit, Dr. Weiss was expecting to see some improvement in light of the encouraging previous meeting. Unfortunately, this turned out not to be the case, leaving Dr. Weiss perplexed. He could not understand what was wrong, suspecting that there must have been some other traumatic event which took place before she was 3. Weiss decided to regress her even further back. Although Weiss took Catherine back to the age of 2, she could not recall any significant memories. He therefore told her to go back to a time from which her symptoms arose. What came next took him totally by surprise. I see white steps leading up to a big white building with pillars open in front. There are no doorways. I'm wearing a long dress, a sack made of rough material. My hair is braided, long blonde hair. My name is Aronda. I am 18. I see a marketplace in front of the building. There are baskets. You carry the baskets on your shoulders. We live in a valley. There is no water. The year is 1863 BC. Astonished by what he was hearing, Dr. Weiss tried to focus on the task at hand. Although Catherine was recalling what appeared to be memories of previous lives, Weiss was interested in pinpointing traumatic events which were triggering her symptoms today. He asked her to go to a time in that life where her trauma began. There are big waves knocking down trees. There's no place to run. It's cold. The water is cold. I have to save my baby, but I cannot. Just have to hold her tight. I drown. The water chokes me. I can't breathe, can't swallow salty water. My baby is torn out of my arms. I see clouds. My baby is with me, and others from my village. I see my brother. When the session ended, both patient and doctor were awestruck. Needing time to contemplate and absorb what had just taken place, they arranged the next meeting and left the room, trying to fathom the profoundness of what they had just witnessed. Although Dr. Weiss was a traditionalist, when it came to the scientific method, he now had some challenging data to process, along with unconventional concepts concerning reincarnation. This was now getting heavy. The idea of trauma from a previous life affecting a future life seemed too far-fetched to be true. But what he had just witnessed suggested it could be true. It could be the case. The following week, Catherine bounced into Dr. Weiss's office in an unusually upbeat manner, saying that most of her fears and anxieties had diminished. Intrigued by all this, Dr. Weiss continued with the regressions to ascertain if there were other traumatic episodes in other lifetimes. Over the next few months, Catherine revealed many previous lives going all the way back to ancient Egypt and beyond. Each time a life ended, the consciousness would detach from the body to a place free from earthly suffering, a place where the soul spirit would become renewed. Catherine would describe waiting in a place of peace and light, in the company of many other spirits and souls. She called these spirits masters. Here they would assess her former life and prepare her for the next one. On a number of occasions, Dr. Weiss was able to converse with the masters while Catherine's subconscious was viewing the period between lives. I am aware of a bright light. It's wonderful. You get energy from this light. While Catherine was resting between lives in peaceful silence, she suddenly became energized and spoke, this time in a loud husky voice with no hesitation. Our task is to learn, to become godlike through knowledge. We know so little. You are here to be my teacher. I have so much to learn, By knowledge we approach God, and then we can rest. Then we come back to teach and help others. The loud husky voice spoke again in a later session to reveal personal information about Dr. Weiss that only he could have known. Catherine was now acting as a conduit, allowing the masters to communicate directly to Dr. Weiss. Your father is here, and your son, who is a small child. Your father says you will know him because his name is Avram, and your daughter is named after him. Also, his death was due to his heart. Your son's heart was also important, for it was backward, like a chicken's. He made a great sacrifice for you out of his love. His soul is very advanced. His death satisfied his parents' debts. Also, he wanted to show you that medicine can only go so far, that its scope is very limited. Astonished at what he was hearing, Dr. Weiss knew that Catherine had no way of knowing his father's name and that he died of a heart attack. She also had no way of knowing that Dr. Weiss had lost a son a few years prior, only 23 days old. The child's heart had a rare defect in which it had almost developed backwards. Who, I sputtered, who is there? Who tells you these things? The masters, she whispered. The master spirits tell me. They tell me I have lived 86 times in physical state. Catherine went on to say that there are many dimensions, different planes and different times, each one being a higher level of conscious awareness. The plane you experience all depends upon how far your consciousness has evolved. The masters told Catherine that some of us possess intuitive powers greater than others, powers accrued from previous times. Therefore, people are not all created equal. Using this regression technique, Dr. Weiss took Catherine back through previous lives. He was able to unravel a multitude of traumatic experiences which appeared to precipitate emotional residue in the life she was experiencing now. Furthermore, by being made aware of these issues, Catherine was able to work through each traumatic memory in order to diffuse its impact on her present life.
Melodies in my head. I sing the blues. Old friend, come along with me once again. You were right, I was wrong when you said play that song. I found you. I sang the blues. I sang the blues. We sang the blues.
Many adherents of reincarnation believe that once the soul has fulfilled the objectives it has set itself, the death process will be initiated, a process in which the soul will begin to detach itself from the body and ascend back towards higher vibrations of spirit consciousness. As it ascends, it takes the current life's valuable memories and experiences with it, adding them to the ocean of experiences gathered by every soul who ever lived. This is essentially what they call the Akashic Record, a sea of evolving consciousness. A newly deceased or liberated soul is thought to go through some form of life review, a process in which the most recent life can be analyzed in order to reflect on that experience and to set new goals and objectives for the next round. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each of us may receive what is due us for the things done while in the body, whether good or bad. 2 Corinthians 5:10. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars, they will be consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death. Revelation 21:8. Genius is experience. Some seem to think that it is a gift or talent, but it is the fruit of long experience in many lives. Henry Ford. The word genius comes from the Latin genius, meaning guardian deity or spirit which watches over each person from birth. A derivative of the word genius is genie, a word meaning tutelary, guardian spirit, or related to the Arabian word jinn, spirit. There are many cases throughout the world of children born with almost superhuman talents, as though these talents or level of awareness came from a previous life or connection to an alternative influence. There seems to be no other rational explanation for this phenomena. The word used to describe these children is prodigy, a young person who has a natural ability to do something extremely well. The word comes from the Latin prodigium, which means portent. This is all very interesting because portent
is a term used to signify that something bad is likely to happen in the future. The word portent is made up of two words, port and ent. Port side is the left-hand side of a boat, and ent or ant is a suffix referring to a person who or a thing that. In palmistry, the left hand is the subconscious hand, as all the left side of the body is predominantly controlled by the right side of the brain. Is it the case that those who initially used the term prodigy knew the esoteric meaning behind the word? Famous prodigies throughout history: Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, Austrian composer, 1756 to 1791. Enrico Fermi, Italian physicist, 1901-1954. Sor Juana de la Cruz, Mexican writer, philosopher, composer, 1648 to 1695. Pablo Picasso, Spanish painter, 1881-1973. Blaise Pascal, French mathematician, physicist and inventor, 1623 to 1662. Arthur Rimbaud, French poet, 1854-1891. Clara Schumann, German pianist and composer, 1819-1896. Jean-Francis Champollion, French scholar, 1790-1832. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was a composer during the classical period of the late 18th century. Born in Salzburg, Austria, Mozart showed extraordinary ability in music at a very young age. By the time he was 5, he had already composed a number of pieces and even performed in front of royalty. By the time of his premature death, at the age of 35, he had composed over 600 works, many of which are considered to be musical masterpieces, the standard of which is rarely seen. When we analyze Mozart's birth chart, some interesting and remarkable revelations come to light. Viewing the chart, we see Mozart's north and south nodes are in a very interesting position. These nodes are points in space where the moon's orbit crosses the Earth's orbit as it goes around the sun. They represent the path of the soul as it journeys from one life into the next. Since the sun represents our focal conscious soul and the moon represents our spiritual subconscious, the nodes express our soul's path through this life. The south node relates to our past, our roots, and where we came from, whereas the north node gives us a clue as to what our soul purpose is, essentially what we came into this life to experience. Many of us incarnate, expressing at an early age our south node's chart position characteristics. However, as we grow and develop, we should strive to move in the direction of the north node. It is clearly offering us our individual path towards soul development. Mozart's south node is opposite his ascendant. It is the entry point on his soul's journey, a point at which he should naturally feel comfortable. The soul enters here bearing gifts or baggage from previous lives. The right side of the chart relates to relationship identity, whereas the left side is personal identity. As Mozart's soul entered in the relationship side of the chart, he would have naturally felt comfortable in the company of others, being dependent and heavily influenced by those around him as a child. However, Mozart's soul path is clearly marked by the position of his north node, which falls on his ascendant. The ascendant in a birth chart represents first impressions, the superficial you. If we view this concept as a stage, the soul focal awareness is our expressive personality. This is the front of the stage, what others will see as we project our ego. Our subconscious, on the other hand, is everything behind the stage, including the dressing rooms, props, and scenery. The AC ascendant itself represents first impressions, the moment we walk out onto the stage. For Mozart, this essentially became his soul's purpose, a path to which he fulfilled exceptionally well. The north node is conjunct to Mozart's ascendant in the sign of Virgo I examine. This is the sign of the perfectionist. It is a mutable earth sign expressing its potential in a practical way. Its mutable qualities allow for flexibility, variability, and change relatively quickly. For Mozart, his karmic path was ultimately expressed through his personal identity and ego, allowing his talent and ability to manifest mutable changes to his music and performances while keeping a high standard of perfection throughout. Could it be that Mozart's relatively young passing was, in essence, due to the soul initiating the death process because it had fulfilled all of its objectives here on earth? Sun conjunct Mercury in the 5th house within the sign of Aquarius, I know. This conjunction and placement reveals a great deal concerning Mozart's personality. This is the house of artistic creativity, entertainment, romance, pleasure, gambling, and hobbies. The Sun represents where Mozart's focal attention lies, conjunct with Mercury, the planet of communication. This all comes together within the sign of Aquarius, a sign representing qualities of genius, independence, uniqueness, and innovation. Saturn, being only 6 degrees away from this conjunction, offers its qualities of order, control, hard work, and perseverance into the mix. Being the joint ruler over the sign of Aquarius, its restrictive and orderly energies can be viewed as a necessary ingredient for success in any developing venture. Moon conjunct Pluto in the 4th house within the sign of Sagittarius, I seek. The moon represents the subconscious and emotional needs. Pluto is the planet of transformation, death, and rebirth. The 4th house represents the home environment, family, and sense of security. With Pluto conjunct the moon here in Sagittarius, the individual will have an emotional need to keep moving, dismantling their home environment for the next adventure. Sagittarius in Tarot is represented by the Chariot card, ruled by Jupiter, This is the optimistic and jovial explorer looking for another place to go. A mutable fire sign bringing passion and flexibility to the home environment. Both Pluto and the Moon are primarily concerned with the subconscious. Pluto being associated with Keter, the first Sephiroth on the Kabbalistic tree of life, is regarded as the closest planet to creator consciousness. Furthermore, being conjunct with the Moon should occasionally promote intense spiritual subconscious energy, giving rise to a powerful emotional home environment for Mozart. While Wolfgang was young, his family made several European journeys in which he and Nannerl, Mozart's sister, performed as child prodigies. These began with an exhibition in 1762 at the court of Prince Elector Maximilian III of Bavaria in Munich, and at the imperial courts in Vienna and Prague. A long concert tour followed, spanning 3.5 years, taking the family to the courts of Munich, Mannheim, Paris, London, Dover, The Hague, Amsterdam, Utrecht, Mechelen, and again to Paris, and back home via Zurich, Donaueschingen, and Munich. The family trips were often challenging, and travel conditions were primitive. They had to wait for invitations and reimbursements from the nobility, and they endured long, near-fatal illnesses far from home. When I am travelling in a carriage, or walking after a good meal, or during the night, when I cannot sleep, it is on such occasions that ideas flow best and most abundantly. Mozart. Jupiter in the second house within the sign of Libra, I balance. The second house represents personal finance, material possessions, and concepts of value. Jupiter is the planet of abundance, optimism, and expansion. With Jupiter in this chart position, Mozart had the potential to generate great wealth, expanding his personal finances and assets along the way. However, being in the sign of the balancing scales, this cannot be taken for granted. Although the potential is there, a sensible balanced approach is necessary in order to hold onto that wealth. Mozart made a fortune during his brief lifetime, but seemed determined to spend every cent of it, leading to lifelong money woes and centuries of misconceptions about his final years. Records show that by the 1780s, Mozart was earning as much as 10,000 florins a year, and a letter from Mozart's father stated that he had been paid 1,000 florins for just one concert performance, at a time when labourers took home 25 florins annually. The family was forced to move several times, and some historians believe Mozart may have squandered large sums of money at the gambling table, although others believe betting was just a pastime, not a compulsion. Mars in the 10th house, within the sign of Gemini, I think. The 10th house represents a person's career. This is the sign of Gemini, which is associated with the hands and arms. Mars is the planet of proactive movement, energy, and fiery passion. A person with this planetary placement should have a natural dexterous ability when using their hands and arms in their chosen career. Mozart was a talented man. He was proficient at the keyboard and violin from a very early age, later to become a competent conductor as well as composer. Mars in this position offers the individual ample energy to further their career path. However, as a consequence of this fiery temperament, it can give rise to a possibility of conflict. Mozart began his career in Salzburg, employed by Prince Archbishop Colloredo, the ruler of Salzburg. Mozart developed animosity towards the Archbishop, accusing him of stifling his progress. Mozart and the Archbishop, his employer, nearly came to fisticuffs in early May 1781. On May the 9th, 1781, Mozart wrote from Vienna to his father, "I am still seething with rage, and you, my dearest and most beloved father, are doubtless in the same condition. My patience has been so long tried that at last it has given out. I am no longer so unfortunate as to be in Salzburg service. Today is a happy day for me." When Wolfgang finally jumps ship from the Archbishop's retinue while in Vienna in 1781, he reports that in a confrontation with Colloredo's chamberlain, he was called clown and knave, and was tossed out of the room with a kick in his ass. I am forgetting that this was probably done by order of our worthy Prince Archbishop, Bruce Lamotte, Mozart in Salzburg. T-squares in a person's chart are aspects and areas denoting tension, planets positioned at cross purposes to one another. In Mozart's chart, we see a T-square between his ascendant, his moon Pluto conjunction, and Uranus opposite the AC ascendant. Although these areas grate against one another, generating pressure and stress, the point furthest away from this T-square is regarded as a safe haven, a place where the individual finds relief. In Mozart's case, the balance between his family life, his personal identity, and his relationships with others acts like a pressure cooker, finding a release from the tension through his 10th house of career and 9th house of long-distance travel. A man of ordinary talent will always be ordinary, whether he travels or not. But a man of superior talent will go to pieces if he remains forever in the same place. Mozart. When analyzing the statistics relating to Mozart's chart, the energies and characteristics of the dominant planets, signs and elements should have some impact on the man's personality and overall life. In the following bar chart, we see the planets Mercury, communication, Uranus, progressive, and Pluto, transformation, playing a leading role when influencing Mozart's life and behavior. Mercury is the planet of communication and the thinking process. Uranus represents innovation, progressiveness, novelty, and enlightenment, together with a rebellious streak. Pluto is the planet of transformation, promoting the ability to throw out the old to make way for the new. This would have helped Mozart move from one project to the next very quickly. His dominant signs are Aquarius, I know, Sagittarius, I seek, and Virgo, I examine. A person with these dominant signs would be receptive to intuitive wisdom, together with a desire to seek new adventures by traveling around a great deal. The Virgo aspect would promote an analytical approach to most situations where Mozart would feel the need to examine his experiences in fine detail. Mozart's dominant houses are the 5th, creativity, 4th, home and family, and the 7th, relationships and marriage. This almost perfectly sums him up, with creativity being the main driving force behind Mozart's life. In the above chart, we see the dominant hemispheres, elements, and modes for Mozart's birth chart. The northwest hemisphere relates to the bottom right portion of the chart, the 4th, 5th, and 6th houses. These people are generally happier within their home environment and around others, focusing their attention on being creative and enjoying home pleasures. The element which dominates Mozart's disposition is air, an element relating to the mind and the thinking process. Out of the 3 modes, we find Mozart mostly influenced by mutable energy. This gives him a great deal of flexibility in his day-to-day activities. To sum up, Mozart would be content being creative at home, utilizing his flexible thinking ability while enjoying the pleasures of life. If the concept of reincarnation is a true phenomena with various objectives to fulfill during each incarnation, some being relatively mundane by today's standards of success, then our time here as aspects of consciousness observing itself from various perspectives should not be taken too seriously, as we as individuals should appreciate this profound experience from its simplest to its most complicated, enjoying each step of the journey. Man suffers only because he takes seriously what the gods made for fun. Alan Wilson Watts. Become what you are. Although an astrological birth chart can give you an insight as to your soul's purpose, the sheer size and scope of the overall development of this divine project seems to be what matters. Within that project, no matter how big or small your immediate role appears to be, it still has value. The knock-on effect of just a simple action or word during one's lifetime can have an exponential influence over future events and generations, creating ripples which redefine the course and direction of the collective development. You could not remove a single grain of sand from its place without thereby changing something throughout all parts of the immeasurable whole. The Vocation of Man, 1800. It used to be thought that the events that changed the world were things like big bombs, maniac politicians, huge earthquakes, or vast population movements. But it has now been realized that this is a very old-fashioned view held by people totally out of touch with modern thought. The things that change the world, according to chaos theory, are the tiny things. A butterfly flaps its wings in the Amazonian jungle, and subsequently a storm ravages half of Europe. Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. In one way, the interaction between all variations of perception appears to be delicately fragile, if affected by the movement of a butterfly thousands of miles away. But on the other hand, the overall development of this collective consciousness seems robust and perpetual, catering for every eventuality to play out while keeping its unfolding evolution ongoing. It seems apparent that no matter where you find yourself in life, what your status or role is, you are an essential part of the whole, and without your contribution, this impressive and elaborate interwoven physical experience could go in an entirely different direction. I would suggest that in order to advance not only your individual soul's evolution, but that of the collective, it is essential that you are not afraid to follow your own intuition. And that intuition is tethered to your spiritual subconscious. Sometimes we find our subconscious taking over in a given situation, making us do or say things which appear out of character. A single comment or action's knock-on effects ultimately steer the outcome in a totally new, sometimes unwanted direction. Although the situation seems important and unsettling to the individual at the time of the intervention, the consequence of that chain of events, continuing unchallenged, could have allowed the person to go down a path counterproductive to the initial goals set by the soul. For example, while dating a person you adore, thinking they are your perfect match, one of you may say or do something out of character, the consequences of which quickly bring the budding relationship to an abrupt end. An outside influence could also come along to intervene, setting in motion a situation which ultimately drives you both apart. This may very well be the result of a subtle but effective influence from the spirit realm. I am confident that there truly is such a thing as living again, that the living spring from the dead, and that the souls of the dead are in existence. Socrates, Plato, Phaedo, on the soul. I did not begin when I was born, nor when I was conceived. I have been growing, developing, through incalculable myriads of millennium. All my previous selves have their voices, echoes, promptings in me. Incalculable times again shall I be born. Jack London, The Star Rover. Regret is worthless. Don't worry, you'll get another chance to prove yourself in this life or another. Bert McCoy. The soul comes from without into the human body as into a temporary abode, and it goes out of it anew. It passes into another habitation, for the soul is immortal. Ralph Waldo Emerson. I could well imagine that I might have lived in former centuries, and there encountered questions I was not yet able to answer, that I had to be born again because I had not fulfilled the task that was given to me. Carl Jung. Friends are all souls that we've known in our lives. We're drawn to each other. That's how I feel about friends. Even if I have only known them a day, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to wait till I have known them for 2 years, because anyway, we must have met somewhere before, you know. George Harrison. He saw all these forms and faces in 1,000 relationships become newly born. Each one was mortal, a passionate, painful example of all that is transitory. Yet none of them died, they only changed. We're always reborn, continually had a new face. Only time stood between one face and another. Hermann Hesse, Nobel Laureate. The souls must re-enter the absolute substance whence they have emerged. But to accomplish this, they must develop all the perfections, the germ of which is planted in them. And if they have not fulfilled this condition during one life, they must commence another, a third, and so forth, until they have acquired the condition which fits them for reunion with God. The Zohar, one of the principal Kabbalistic texts.
When you see it all, there's another world out there. Oh, so far another world. Can you see the faces on Mars and the shadows on the moon? Yet it all seems so far. Looking out, there's another world out there. Finding out, and it's all so clear. See all the colors and the light years, and the fall of Babylon. You can read about the pharaohs. You can read about the sun. There's another world. There's another world. There's another world. Another world. Oh, I hear you walking. All the lights around your head. We're too busy talking to notice it's begun.